In 2019, a quiet family home went up in flames. When firefighters kicked down the front door, they didn't find anyone running for their lives. What they found inside stopped them cold. The entire family locked in the basement with no chance to escape. One firefighter pulled them out and watched the dying father whisper his final words, "Protect my family. They'll come back for them." What started as a routine fire call turned into a case no one could explain, until the town's darkest secret finally came to light. Captain Ryan Torres had fought fires for 15 years, but he'd never seen burn patterns like this. The flames licked too perfectly around the windows, every exit point blocked by furniture that had been moved deliberately, not thrown by panic. The accelerant smell hit him before he reached the front porch. "This isn't right," he muttered into his radio, shouldering through the green front door that hung crooked on melted hinges. Smoke poured through the suburban home like black water. Ryan's thermal camera swept the living room, empty. Kitchen, clear. But his equipment kept pinging toward the back of the house, toward what should have been a basement. "Torres, we've got heat signatures below ground level," came the crackling voice of Lieutenant Hayes. Multiple bodies, not moving. Ryan's stomach dropped. In a house fire, people run up, not down, unless they couldn't. He found the basement door behind a wall of smoke. It was locked from the outside. Not latched. Locked. With a deadbolt that had been installed backwards, trapping anyone below like animals in a cage. Ryan's axe bit through the wood in 3 swings. The stairs groaned under his boots as he descended into hell. The basement reeked of gasoline and terror. 4 figures huddled against the far wall, a woman clutching 2 children and a man slumped beside them, blood pooling beneath his head. "Phoenix Fire Department!" Ryan shouted, dropping to his knees beside the family. "I'm getting you out of here." The woman's eyes were wide with shock, soot streaking her face like war paint. "They locked us down here," she gasped. "They poured gas everywhere and locked us down here to die." Ryan scooped up the little girl first, maybe 8 years old, unconscious but breathing. The boy was next, coughing but alive. He passed both children up to Hayes, who'd appeared at the top of the stairs with backup. The woman could walk, barely. She leaned against Ryan's shoulder as they climbed toward cleaner air. "My husband," she whispered. "Please, my husband." Ryan went back down alone. The man was FBI agent Marcus Dalton, according to the credentials scattered beside him. Mid-40s, athletic build, with a head wound that hadn't come from falling debris. Someone had hit him before the fire started. Marcus's eyes fluttered open as Ryan lifted him. "My family," he whispered, blood on his lips. "Are they—" "Safe," Ryan grunted, carrying him toward the stairs. "They're safe." But Marcus's grip tightened on Ryan's jacket. His voice was urgent, desperate. "Listen to me. There's a mole in the bureau, someone who knows our cases, our locations. They came for my family because I found out who." Ryan's boots hit the first step. Smoke was getting thicker, the house groaning as support beams weakened. "Save your strength. We're almost out." "No." Marcus's fingers dug into Ryan's shoulder. "Promise me. Protect my family. They'll come back for them when they realize we survived." "You're going to protect them yourself," Ryan said, but he could feel Marcus's breathing getting shallower with each step. They burst through the basement door into slightly cleaner air. The living room was an inferno now, the ceiling starting to sag. Ryan carried Marcus through the front door just as the roof collapsed behind them. On the front lawn, paramedics swarmed. Ryan laid Marcus on a stretcher and watched the EMTs work frantically, but he could see it in their faces. Too much smoke, too much blood loss. Marcus grabbed Ryan's wrist one final time. "Promise me," he whispered. "Elena, the kids, protect them." Ryan nodded. "I promise." Marcus smiled, squeezed Ryan's hand, and died. 2 hours later, Ryan sat in the hospital parking lot, still wearing his soot-stained gear, when a woman approached his truck. Elena Dalton looked smaller than she had in the basement, more fragile, but her eyes carried a steel that hadn't been there before. "You were with him when he died," she said. It wasn't a question. Ryan nodded. "He wanted me to tell you he loved you and that you need to be careful. He said there's someone inside the FBI who can't be trusted." Elena's face went pale. She glanced around the parking lot, then climbed into Ryan's passenger seat without invitation. "Those men who broke into our house," she whispered. "They knew things they shouldn't have known. My husband's case files, his schedule, even that we'd be home tonight." "What was your husband working on?" "Cartel infiltration. He'd been tracking money laundering operations, but recently he'd become convinced that someone inside federal law enforcement was feeding intelligence to the cartels." Elena's voice cracked. "He said he was close to proving it." Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. A federal agent murdered, his family targeted for elimination, and somewhere out there, a mole with a badge who thought they'd succeeded. "Where would your husband have kept his evidence?" Ryan asked. Elena stared at the hospital entrance, where her children were being treated for smoke inhalation. "He has a safe house, a place he made me memorize in case something like this happened." She turned to Ryan, and he saw the same desperation Marcus had shown in his final moments. "Will you help me? Will you help me finish what he started?" Ryan thought about his promise to a dying man, about a family locked in a basement to burn alive, about the accelerant patterns that proved this was murder. "Yeah," he said, "I'll help you." What neither of them knew was that 3 blocks away, a black SUV sat in the shadows, and the man inside was already making phone calls to clean up the mess his team had left behind. The mole had survived 15 years inside the FBI by being thorough. He wouldn't make the mistake of leaving witnesses twice. The safe house was a narrow duplex in a forgotten neighborhood where porch lights flickered and nobody asked questions. Elena guided Ryan through streets that grew progressively darker, her hands steady on his dashboard GPS, despite everything she'd been through. "Marcus rented this place under a fake name 3 years ago," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Said if anything ever happened to him, I should come here first." Ryan parked 2 blocks away, scanning the empty streets. His firefighter instincts screamed that this felt wrong, too quiet, too convenient. How many people knew about this place? Just him. And now me. Elena's fingers found the spare key taped under the mailbox, exactly where Marcus had told her it would be. "He made me practice the route every few months, said preparation was the difference between living and dying in his line of work." The duplex smelled like dust and paranoia. Marcus had furnished it like a bunker, minimal furniture, blackout curtains, and a wall of monitors that looked more expensive than anything a federal agent should afford on his salary. Elena moved through the space like she'd been here before. She went straight to a bookshelf and pulled out a false-backed copy of The Art of War. Behind it sat a fireproof safe. "He taught me the combination on our anniversary," she said, spinning the dial. "Our wedding date reversed." The safe clicked open, revealing stacks of documents, hard drives, and something that made Ryan's blood run cold. Surveillance photos of Elena and the kids at school pickup, grocery shopping, walking their dog. Someone had been watching the Dalton family for months. "Jesus," Ryan breathed, lifting one of the photos. "How long has this been going on?" Elena's face went white. "I remember this day. Sophie lost her backpack, so we went back into the school." She pointed to a timestamp on the photo. "That's 3 weeks ago." Ryan spread the surveillance photos across Marcus's desk. Different days, different locations, but always the same family routine captured by a telephoto lens. Whoever was watching them knew everything: their schedules, their habits, their vulnerabilities. "Your husband was building a case against someone," Ryan said, opening the first file folder. "Question is, who?" The documents painted a picture of methodical investigation. Bank records showing unusual wire transfers from accounts linked to Mexican cartels. federal drug seizure reports that didn't match the amounts actually taken off the streets. Communication intercepts where cartel leaders discussed law enforcement operations before they happened, and in Marcus's handwriting, scrawled across the top of one report, "How did they know we were coming?" Elena pulled out a laptop from the safe, her movements growing more confident. "Marcus taught me basic computer security, said if I ever needed to access his files, I should assume someone was watching our home internet." The laptop revealed Marcus's real investigation. For 18 months, he'd been tracking a pattern of compromised operations, drug busts that found empty warehouses, witness protection relocations that cartels somehow discovered within days, federal raids that arrived at locations already stripped clean. He suspected there was a mole, but he couldn't narrow it down, Elena said, clicking through encrypted files. Too many people had access to operational intelligence. Ryan leaned over her shoulder, studying a spreadsheet that made his head spin. "How many agents are we talking about?" 47 people across 3 departments had access to the information that kept leaking. Elena's voice carried a bitter edge. Marcus spent months trying to identify which one was dirty. That's when Ryan saw it, a red folder marked "Priority" in Marcus's careful handwriting. Inside were financial records for a single target. Bank statements, property purchases, and investment accounts that showed wealth far beyond federal salary levels. A lifestyle that required additional income from somewhere. "He found him," Elena whispered, staring at a photograph paper-clipped to the financial documents. Marcus found the mole. The photo showed a man in an expensive suit stepping out of a luxury car, distinguished, silver-haired, with the kind of confident smile that belonged on campaign posters. Ryan didn't recognize him, but Elena's sharp intake of breath said she did. "That's Deputy Director Harold Vance," she said. "He's Marcus's boss." Ryan felt the pieces clicking together like a loaded weapon. The guy running the anti-cartel operations is the one feeding them intelligence. It's worse than that. Elena's fingers traced the financial records. "Look at these dates. Vance has been taking cartel money for 7 years. Every major operation, every witness, every undercover agent, he's been selling it all." The laptop screen flickered, then went black. Elena's hands flew over the keyboard, but nothing happened. "That's not normal," she said, a new edge of panic in her voice. "The battery was full." Ryan was already moving toward the window, pulling back the blackout curtain just enough to see the street. 3 black SUVs had appeared from nowhere, parked at strategic positions around the duplex. Men in tactical gear were taking positions behind the vehicles. "We need to go," Ryan said. "Now." Elena grabbed the red folder and a handful of hard drives, stuffing them into a backpack. "There's a back exit through the alley, but—" The front door exploded inward. Ryan pushed Elena toward the rear of the duplex as armed men flooded through the entrance. These weren't local police. Their gear was too expensive, their movements too coordinated. Federal assets, probably the same team that had tried to murder the Dalton family hours earlier. "Where's the woman?" a voice shouted from the front room. "Vance wants her alive for questioning." Elena and Ryan reached the back door just as another tactical team rounded the corner of the alley. Trapped. Elena's hand went to the small of her back, where Ryan suddenly noticed the outline of a concealed weapon. "Marcus made me carry this," she whispered, producing a compact pistol. "Said I might need it someday." "Do you know how to use it?" "He trained me every weekend for 3 years." Elena's voice had gone cold, professional. "Said the day might come when his enemies became my enemies." The tactical team in the alley was advancing slowly, clearly expecting to take them without resistance. They had no idea that the widow they were hunting had been trained by one of the FBI's best agents. Elena raised the pistol with steady hands, sighted down the barrel, and fired 3 precise shots that sent the tactical team diving for cover. "Move," she said, and Ryan followed her through the chaos of the alley, realizing that Elena Dalton was much more than a grieving widow. She was a federal agent's wife who had just declared war on the people who murdered her husband. Behind them, Deputy Director Harold Vance's cleanup team regrouped and gave chase, but they were no longer hunting helpless victims. They were hunting wolves. Elena's stolen police scanner crackled to life as they sped through Phoenix's industrial district in Ryan's pickup truck. All units, BOLO for White Ford F-150, suspects armed and extremely dangerous. They're using local PD to hunt us, Elena said, adjusting the frequency. Vance has contacts everywhere. Ryan took another sharp turn, tires screaming against asphalt. In his rearview mirror, flashing lights were gaining ground. How long before they figure out where we're headed? They already know. Elena pulled out a burner phone Marcus had stashed in the safe house. But my husband was paranoid about backup plans. We're not going where they think we're going. She guided Ryan through a maze of abandoned warehouses until they reached a storage facility that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Elena punched in a code at the gate, and it rolled open with a rusty groan. Unit 47, she said. Marcus rented this under another identity. The storage unit contained enough evidence to destroy Deputy Director Vance's entire operation: boxes of financial records, audio recordings, and, most importantly, a wall covered with photographs connected by red string like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Ryan stared at the evidence wall in amazement. Your husband wasn't just investigating one mole, he was mapping an entire network. Elena nodded grimly. Vance recruited other agents over the years, local police, DEA contacts, even some Border Patrol supervisors. Marcus called it the Iron Pipeline, a distribution network protected from the inside. At the center of the wall was a photograph of Vance shaking hands with a man Ryan didn't recognize. The handwritten note beneath read, Esteban Molina, Sinaloa Liaison, meeting location, Warehouse District, Pier 19. That photo was taken 6 days ago, Elena said. Marcus was planning to use it as evidence when he made his arrest. Ryan studied the timestamp. So Vance knows your husband had proof of their meetings. That's why he moved so fast to eliminate your family. Elena was already pulling boxes from the shelves, searching for something specific. Marcus said if anything happened to him, I should find the insurance policy, something that would force the FBI to act even if they didn't want to. She found it in a sealed envelope marked, for Elena only, a micro SD card and a handwritten note. Elena, this recording will destroy Vance, but it will also put you in more danger than you can imagine. Use it only if there's no other choice. The meeting happens every 2 weeks. Next one is tomorrow night. I love you. M. Ryan watched Elena slide the micro SD card into Marcus's encrypted phone. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy video of what appeared to be a warehouse meeting. Vance's voice came through clearly. The Phoenix operation needs to be shut down. Agent Dalton is getting too close to our arrangement. The man across from him, Esteban Molina, nodded. My associates can handle the Dalton problem permanently. Make it look like a home invasion gone wrong. No, Vance replied. It needs to look like an accident. House fire, family tragedy. Dalton's been working alone on this investigation. Once he's gone, the case dies with him. Elena's hand trembled as she paused the recording. Marcus was wearing a wire. He knew they were planning to kill us. Ryan felt sick. Why didn't he arrest Vance immediately? Because Vance wasn't working alone. Elena fast-forwarded through the recording. Watch this part. The video showed Vance pulling out a list of names. These are the other agents who need to be transferred or eliminated. Anyone who might stumble onto our operation. Ryan counted at least a dozen names on the list. Jesus, how many federal agents is he planning to murder? However many it takes to protect a billion-dollar pipeline. Elena's voice had gone cold again. Marcus didn't just uncover one corrupt agent, he found an entire conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. The storage unit's metal door suddenly rattled. Someone was trying to force the lock. Elena grabbed the SD card and Marcus's most critical files while Ryan moved toward the door, listening. Multiple footsteps, coordinated movement, the metallic sound of weapons being readied. "They tracked us," Elena whispered. "How did they track us?" Ryan's mind raced. "The scanner. They've been listening to us listen to them." The lock gave way with a sharp crack. Elena raised her pistol as tactical gear became visible through the gap, but Ryan grabbed her arm. "Wait, look at their positions." The tactical team was spreading out wrong, taking cover behind vehicles instead of advancing. These weren't Vance's federal assets. Their gear was different, their movements less coordinated. "Phoenix PD," a voice called out. "We're here to help. Agent Dalton, we know you're in there. Detective Lisa Brennan sent us." Elena's eyes widened. Brennan was Marcus's contact in local police, the only cop he trusted. But Ryan's firefighter instincts were screaming danger. If Brennan sent them, how did they know to look here? You said only Marcus knew about this place. Elena's face went pale as the realization hit. Brennan is compromised. Vance got to her. The rescue team was positioning for a kill shot. Elena moved with the fluid precision Marcus had trained into her. She rolled behind a stack of evidence boxes just as the first shots punched through the storage unit's thin walls. Ryan dove the opposite direction, using Marcus's evidence wall as cover. "Brennan wants us alive for questioning," Elena called out over the gunfire, "which means these aren't Brennan's people." Ryan watched Elena return fire with deadly accuracy, forcing the fake police team to retreat behind their vehicles. She wasn't just Marcus's widow anymore. She was a trained operator fighting for her life. "We need to get this evidence out of here," she said during a brief lull in shooting. "Even if we don't survive, someone needs to expose Vance's network." Ryan looked at the boxes of documents, the recordings, the proof of a conspiracy that reached into the heart of federal law enforcement. "How do we get it past them?" Elena smiled grimly, pulling out a device Ryan didn't recognize. "Marcus taught me about contingency plans. This is a dead man's switch. If I don't check in every 12 hours, everything we found gets uploaded automatically to every major news outlet and the FBI's Internal Affairs Division." "You already uploaded it?" 3 hours ago." Elena's smile widened. "Win or lose, Harold Vance's operation ends tomorrow." The tactical team was regrouping for another assault when Ryan's radio crackled to life. "Captain Torres, this is Chief Williams. What's your 20? We've got reports of shots fired at your location. Real Phoenix Fire Department. Real backup." Elena looked at Ryan with something approaching hope. "Think they'll believe us?" Ryan keyed his radio. "Chief, we've got federal agents down and a massive corruption case that goes all the way to FBI leadership. I need you to contact Internal Affairs immediately." But even as help was coming, Ryan could see more vehicles approaching in the distance. Vance's cleanup operation was far from over. The war for Marcus Dalton's evidence was just beginning. Chief Williams arrived with half the Phoenix Fire Department and enough local police to start a small war. But as Ryan watched the response unfold, he realized they might have walked into an even bigger trap. "Which of these cops can we trust?" Elena whispered, crouched behind the evidence boxes as uniformed officers secured the storage facility. Ryan studied the faces of the responding officers, looking for the telltale signs he'd learned to recognize in 15 years of emergency response. Some looked genuinely confused by the situation. Others seemed too calm, too prepared for what should have been a chaotic scene. "About half of them," he said grimly. "Maybe less." Detective Lisa Brennan appeared through the chaos, her service weapon drawn but pointed down. She was exactly what Elena had described, mid-40s, sharp eyes, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of working Phoenix's worst neighborhoods. "Agent Dalton?" Brennan called out. "I'm Detective Brennan. Your husband contacted me 3 days ago about a corruption investigation." Elena hesitated. "What did he tell you?" "That Deputy Director Vance was dirty and that you might need protection if something happened to him." Brennan holstered her weapon and approached slowly. He also said you'd have evidence that could bring down the entire network. Ryan watched Elena's internal struggle. Trust could get them killed, but isolation guaranteed it. "Show me your phone," Elena said finally. Brennan looked confused, but handed over her device. Elena scrolled through the recent calls, then showed the screen to Ryan. 3 calls from Marcus's number in the past week, the last one yesterday morning. "He called you 6 hours before the attack," Elena realized. "He knew it was coming." Brennan nodded. "He said if anything happened to him, I should look for a fire that wasn't really a fire. When the call came in about your house, I knew." She gestured toward the evidence scattered around the storage unit. "This is what he was protecting, isn't it?" Elena made her decision. She pulled out the micro SD card containing Vance's recorded confession. "This is Harold Vance admitting to murder conspiracy and cartel cooperation. But it's not just him. There's a whole network of corrupted federal agents." Brennan whistled low as she examined the evidence wall Marcus had constructed. "How many people are we talking about?" "At least 15 federal agents, maybe double that in local law enforcement contacts." Ryan pointed to the network diagram Marcus had created. "Your husband wasn't just investigating one case, he was unraveling an entire criminal organization operating inside the justice system." That's when Ryan noticed something that made his blood freeze. On Marcus's evidence wall, connected to Deputy Director Vance by red string, was a photograph of Chief Williams. Elena saw it at the same time. "Brennan, we need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" Ryan pointed to the photo. Chief Williams was shaking hands with Esteban Molina outside the same warehouse where Vance had been recorded. The timestamp showed the meeting happened 2 weeks ago. "My boss is compromised," Brennan breathed. "Jesus Christ, how deep does this go?" The answer came in the form of Chief Williams' voice over the loudspeaker. "Captain Torres, Detective Brennan, we need you to come out with your hands visible. FBI leadership is here to take custody of the evidence." Through the storage unit's small window, Ryan could see black SUVs arriving. Federal agents in tactical gear were taking positions alongside the local police, but their body language was all wrong. Instead of investigating a crime scene, they were setting up a perimeter to contain it. "That's not FBI internal affairs," Elena said, recognizing some of the faces. "Those are Vance's people." Brennan was already moving, grabbing handfuls of Marcus's evidence files. "There's a service tunnel that runs under this facility. Maintenance access from the old irrigation system. We can get out through the adjacent property." "What about all this evidence?" Ryan gestured to the boxes of documents that could bring down Vance's entire network. Elena held up her encrypted phone. "The digital copies are already uploaded to the Dead Man Switch, but we need the originals to prove they weren't fabricated." She grabbed the most critical files and hard drives. "Everything else we leave behind." Brennan led them through a hidden panel in the storage unit's back wall. The service tunnel was narrow and dark, smelling of rust and decades of accumulated desert dust. They crawled single file through the cramped space while muffled voices echoed from the storage facility above. "Torres, Brennan, we know you're in there. Come out and nobody gets hurt." But Ryan could hear Chief Williams coordinating with the federal agents, discussing cleanup protocols and evidence containment. They weren't planning arrests. They were planning executions. The tunnel opened into an abandoned maintenance building on the adjacent property. Brennan kicked out a rusted grate, and they emerged into the Phoenix night air just as the first explosions rocked the storage facility behind them. "They're destroying everything," Elena said, watching flames consume Marcus's evidence wall through the building's windows. 7 years of investigation. Gone. "Not everything." Brennan held up a hard drive she'd grabbed. "Your husband was smart. He kept redundant copies of the most important files." Ryan's radio crackled with emergency chatter. "Structure fire at Desert Storage. Multiple units responding. Possible gas leak explosion." "They're making it look like an accident," he realized. "Just like they did with your house." Elena's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. She read it quickly, then looked up with fear in her eyes. Vance knows about the dead man's switch. He's got people moving to intercept the uploads before they go public. Brennan checked her watch. How much time do we have? 8 hours before the next automated upload, but if his people are already in position? Elena didn't finish the sentence. Ryan understood. Vance's network was vast enough to suppress the story even after it went public. News outlets could be pressured, federal agencies could claim national security, and the evidence could disappear into the same black hole that had swallowed other inconvenient truths. "We need to force his hand," Ryan said. "Make him react instead of controlling the situation." "How?" Elena smiled grimly, pulling out a second phone. Not Marcus's encrypted device, but a simple burner with a Phoenix area code. "By doing something he won't expect. Instead of hiding from his people, we're going to walk right into the middle of them." Brennan stared at her. "That's suicide." "No," Elena said, dialing a number from memory. "That's war, and my husband taught me that sometimes the best defense is a completely insane offense." The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Deputy Director Vance." "Hello, Harold," Elena said, her voice steady as steel. "We need to talk." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 10 seconds before Vance's carefully controlled voice returned. "Elena, I'm so sorry for your loss. Marcus was a good agent." "Cut the bullshit, Harold." Elena's voice carried the cold fury of a woman who had nothing left to lose. "I know about Esteban Molina, I know about the iron pipeline, and I know you ordered my family's execution." Ryan watched Elena pace in the abandoned maintenance building, her tactical training taking over as she prepared for psychological warfare. "I think grief is making you paranoid," Vance replied smoothly. "You've been through a terrible trauma. Let me send some people to help you." "The same people who tried to burn my children alive?" Elena cut him off. "I have the recording, Harold. Your voice, planning Marcus's murder with your cartel friends." The silence was longer this time. When Vance spoke again, his mask had slipped just enough to reveal the predator underneath. "What do you want?" "A trade, the complete list of corrupted agents in your network and safe passage for my family. In exchange, the recording disappears forever." Detective Brennan looked at Elena like she'd lost her mind. Ryan understood the strategy, but it was incredibly dangerous. "You're bluffing," Vance said. "If you had real evidence, you'd have gone to internal affairs already." Elena smiled grimly. "I tried that, Harold, but guess what? Your network includes people in internal affairs, too. Agent Patricia Monroe sends her regards." Ryan heard something crack in Vance's voice. Monroe was clearly someone important, someone Vance thought was secure. "Where do you want to meet?" Vance asked finally. "Pier 19, Warehouse District. 1 hour. You come alone, or the recording goes public immediately." "Elena, you're making a mistake." She hung up and immediately removed the phone's battery. "He'll try to trace the call location, but by the time his people get here, we'll be gone." Brennan stared at her. "Please tell me you're not actually planning to walk into that warehouse alone." "Of course not." Elena checked her weapon, then looked at Ryan. "That's where you come in. Marcus trained me for tactical operations, but I need someone who understands building layouts, exit strategies, and emergency response." Ryan felt the weight of his promise to Marcus settling on his shoulders. "What's the real plan?" "Vance will bring a kill team to Pier 19, planning to eliminate us and recover the evidence. But he doesn't know we've already uploaded everything to the dead man's switch." Elena pulled out Marcus's encrypted phone. "While he's focused on the warehouse meeting, we'll be breaking into FBI headquarters to access his personal files." Brennan's eyes widened. "That's insane. Security at the federal building is designed to keep people out, not in." Elena interrupted. "Marcus gave me building access codes in case of emergency, and Vance will have pulled most of his security assets to the warehouse operation. Ryan was already thinking through the logistics. How do we get inside without triggering every alarm in the building? We don't break in. We walk through the front door. Elena held up a federal ID badge that Ryan hadn't seen before. Marcus made me a consultant badge for his investigation. It's still active. The plan was audacious enough to work. While Vance's people surrounded an empty warehouse, they'd be inside his office downloading files that could expose the entire conspiracy. But Ryan's firefighter instincts were screaming that they were missing something crucial. "What happens when Vance realizes we're not coming to the warehouse?" he asked. Elena's expression darkened. "That's when things get really dangerous. Once he knows we played him, he'll throw everything at stopping us. Federal resources, local police assets, probably cartel enforcers too." Brennan checked her service weapon. "How long do we have once we're inside the FBI building?" 20 minutes maximum," Elena replied. "After that, Vance will have enough people positioned to trap us inside." They gathered the essential evidence files and prepared to leave the maintenance building. Ryan's radio crackled with emergency chatter about the storage facility fire, but underneath the routine calls, he heard something that made his blood run cold. "All units, BOLO for federal fugitives. Approach with extreme caution. Suspects may be armed with classified materials." "They're not just hunting us anymore," Ryan realized. "They're turning us into enemies of the state." Elena's jaw tightened. "Good. That means we're winning. Vance only plays the national security card when he's desperate." As they prepared to leave for the FBI building, Detective Brennan grabbed Elena's arm. "There's something you need to know. Your husband contacted me about more than just Vance's corruption." "What do you mean?" Brennan's face was grim. Marcus suspected that Vance's network extends beyond law enforcement. He found connections to defense contractors, congressional staffers, even federal judges. "This isn't just about drug money. It's about a criminal organization that's infiltrated the entire justice system." Elena stared at her. "How high does it go?" "High enough that exposing Vance might not be enough to stop it. We could cut off one head, and 2 more could grow back." Ryan felt the scope of what they were facing settle like lead in his stomach. They weren't just fighting a corrupt FBI deputy director. They were taking on a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. But as he looked at Elena's determined face, he remembered Marcus's final words. "Protect my family." Sometimes protection meant more than just keeping them alive. Sometimes it meant ensuring the world was safe enough for them to live in. "Then we'd better make sure we get everything," Ryan said. "Not just Vance's files, everything connected to his network." Elena nodded grimly. Marcus always said the only way to kill a hydra is to burn it to the roots. They left the maintenance building as sirens wailed in the distance, heading toward a confrontation that would either expose the truth or get them all killed. In 30 minutes, Deputy Director Harold Vance would arrive at an empty warehouse. By then, they planned to be deep inside his office, downloading the evidence that could bring down an empire built on corruption and murder. The only question was whether they'd live long enough to see justice served. The FBI building's parking garage was nearly empty at 11:47 p.m., exactly as Elena had predicted. She swiped her consultant badge at the security checkpoint while Ryan and Detective Brennan waited in the shadows behind a concrete pillar. "Evening, Mrs. Dalton," the security guard said, his voice carrying genuine sympathy. "Heard about Marcus? Hell of a thing. You working late on his cases?" Elena's performance was flawless. Grief-stricken widow, tying up loose ends. "Can't sleep anyway. Figured I'd organize his files before they reassign his office." The guard waved her through without a second glance. Ryan admired how naturally she lied. Marcus had trained her well for operations that required deception. They took the elevator to the 7th floor in tense silence. Elena's hands were steady as she unlocked Marcus's office, but Ryan could see the emotional weight hitting her as they entered the space where her husband had worked his final case. "Vance's office is 3 doors down," Elena whispered, moving toward Marcus's computer. "But first, I need to access my husband's encrypted files. He might have evidence he never had time to move to the safe house." Detective Brennan positioned herself by the office door, watching the hallway for security patrols. "How long do we have before Vance realizes the warehouse meeting was a setup?" Elena checked her watch. "He should be arriving at Pier 19 right now. Once he realizes we're not there, maybe 15 minutes before he starts making calls." Ryan helped Elena boot up Marcus's computer while she entered a complex series of passwords. The screen filled with file directories that painted a picture of obsessive investigation, hundreds of documents, surveillance photos, and audio recordings. "Jesus," Ryan breathed, looking at folder names like Congressional Connections and Judicial Compromises. "Your husband wasn't just investigating Vance's network, he was mapping the entire shadow government." Elena opened a file labeled Iron Pipeline, Final Analysis. The document revealed the true scope of the conspiracy. Vance's operation wasn't just about protecting cartel drug shipments. It was about moving money, weapons, and people through corrupted government channels. "Look at this," Elena said, pointing to a financial flowchart. "The cartels aren't just paying bribes. They're funding legitimate businesses, political campaigns, even federal law enforcement equipment contracts." Brennan left her post by the door to examine the evidence. "These companies, I recognize some of these names. They're major government contractors." The computer screen showed a web of interconnected corruption that reached into every level of American law enforcement. Local police departments buying equipment from cartel-funded companies. Federal agencies using software developed by compromised contractors, even military suppliers with direct connections to Esteban Molina's organization. This is why they had to kill Marcus, Elena realized. He didn't just find one dirty agent, he found proof that the entire system has been compromised. That's when Ryan heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, moving with the deliberate pace of someone who belonged in the building. Multiple sets of feet, all heading toward their location. "They're here," he whispered. Elena's fingers flew over the keyboard, copying files to a portable drive. "Almost done. Just need Vance's personal communications dash." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing the hallway in red. Through the office windows, Ryan could see tactical teams taking positions in the parking garage below. "Brennan," Elena called out. "How many exits from this floor?" "2 stairwells, but they'll have both covered by now." Brennan's voice was tight with controlled fear. "We're trapped." Elena grabbed Marcus's portable drive and headed for the door. "Not if we go up instead of down." She led them toward a maintenance access door at the end of the hallway. "Marcus showed me this during one of his security briefings. There's roof access through the mechanical room." The maintenance area was a maze of pipes and electrical conduits. Elena moved through it with confidence, following a route Marcus had obviously drilled into her. Ryan could hear boots on the stairs below. Vance's people were sweeping the building floor by floor. They reached the roof access just as Ryan's radio crackled to life with a voice he recognized. Chief Williams, coordinating with federal agents. "Building is secure. Suspects are contained on floors 6 through 8. Begin systematic search." "Your boss is here," Ryan told Brennan grimly. "Former boss," she corrected. "I'm done taking orders from corrupted authority." The roof of the FBI building offered a commanding view of downtown Phoenix, but no obvious escape route. Elena moved toward a section of the roof that bordered the adjacent office building. "There," she said, pointing to a gap of maybe 8 feet between buildings. "Marcus and I practiced this route during emergency drills." Ryan looked at the gap, then at the 7-story drop to the street below. "You practiced jumping between federal buildings?" "Counterterrorism training includes escape and evasion scenarios." Elena secured the evidence drive in her jacket pocket. The question is whether you trust me enough to follow." Before Ryan could answer, the roof access door behind them exploded open. Federal agents in tactical gear poured through, weapons raised, flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Elena Dalton, this is Deputy Director Vance. You're surrounded. Surrender the stolen materials immediately." Vance emerged from behind his tactical team, no longer bothering with his polished federal executive facade. His voice carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to absolute power. "Your husband was a traitor, Elena. He was selling federal intelligence to cartel contacts. The evidence you think you have is fabricated." Elena turned to face him, her own weapon drawn, but not yet aimed. "That's a good story, Harold. Almost believable. Except I have recordings of you admitting to murder conspiracy." "Recordings can be altered. Digital evidence can be manufactured." Vance stepped closer, his tactical team maintaining formation. "But you're about to become a footnote in a classified report about domestic terrorism." Ryan realized what was happening. Vance wasn't planning to arrest them. He was planning to execute them and blame it on resisting federal agents during a terrorism investigation. "Elena," Ryan said quietly, his eyes on the gap between buildings. "Time to go?" She smiled grimly, raised her weapon toward Vance's position, and fired 3 shots that sent the tactical team diving for cover. Then she ran toward the edge of the roof. Ryan and Brennan followed, their boots pounding across the rooftop as automatic weapons fire erupted behind them. Elena reached the building's edge and leaped without hesitation, her body flying through the night air toward the adjacent office building. She landed hard, rolled, and came up firing suppressing shots back toward the FBI building. Brennan went next, her police training evident in the way she controlled her landing, and immediately took cover. Ryan was about to jump when a bullet cracked past his ear. He turned to see Vance personally taking aim with a sniper rifle. "You made a promise to a dead man," Vance called out. "Time to join him." Ryan dove off the roof just as Vance's shot split the air where his head had been. He hit the adjacent building harder than Elena had, his shoulders screaming as he rolled across the rooftop. But he was alive, and they still had the evidence that could bring down Vance's entire network. "This way," Elena said, helping him to his feet. "There's a fire escape on the north side." As they descended toward the street, Ryan could see the scope of Vance's response. Federal vehicles, local police units, even unmarked SUVs that probably contained cartel enforcers. The entire downtown area was being locked down. "How do we get past all this?" Brennan asked, looking at the coordination between supposedly separate law enforcement agencies. Elena checked her phone, then smiled grimly. "We don't run from them. We run toward them." Ryan stared at her. "What do you mean?" "The dead man's switch activates in 3 hours. All we have to do is stay alive long enough for Marcus's evidence to go public." She pointed toward the most heavily secured building in their line of sight. "And the safest place to hide from corrupted federal agents is inside a building full of honest ones." Ryan followed her gaze to the imposing structure 6 blocks away. "Phoenix Police Department headquarters." "You want to turn ourselves in?" "I want to force Vance to make his corruption visible to honest cops." Elena's eyes gleamed with the same tactical intelligence that had kept them alive this far. "He can control federal agencies and buy local contacts, but he can't arrest us inside police headquarters without exposing his entire operation." It was insane enough to work, or insane enough to get them all killed. Phoenix Police Department headquarters at midnight looked like a fortress under siege. Elena counted at least 12 federal vehicles surrounding the building, their occupants trying to look like routine law enforcement while clearly coordinating a containment operation. "Vance is moving fast," Detective Brennan observed as they approached from the east side. "He's got people positioned at every entrance." Ryan studied the federal agents' positions through his binoculars. "They're not trying to arrest us anymore. This is a kill operation disguised as federal cooperation." Elena's tactical mind was already working through the problem. The front entrance is too exposed, but there's a service entrance near the evidence processing bay. If we can get inside without Vance's people spotting us. They moved through the shadows of downtown Phoenix, using construction barriers and parked vehicles as cover. Elena's federal training showed in every movement. She instinctively checked sight lines, identified cover positions, and moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd been taught to survive in hostile territory. "There," she whispered, pointing to a loading dock where 2 Phoenix PD officers were processing evidence from the day shift. "Those are honest cops. I can tell by their body language. They're not part of Vance's network." But as they prepared to approach the loading dock, Ryan's radio crackled with a transmission that made his blood freeze. "Captain Torres, this is Deputy Chief Anderson. We have a federal fugitive warrant for your arrest. Surrender immediately, and you will not be harmed." Elena grabbed Ryan's arm. "Don't answer. Anderson is on Marcus's list of compromised officers." "How many people in Phoenix PD are working for Vance?" Brennan asked, her voice tight with betrayal. "Too many." Elena checked her weapon. "But not everyone. We just need to find the right people." They reached the loading dock as the 2 honest officers finished securing evidence bags. Elena made the call to trust them, stepping into the light with her hands partially raised. "Officers, I'm Elena Dalton, widow of FBI agent Marcus Dalton. We need your help." The older officer, a sergeant with 20 years on his face, looked confused, but not hostile. "Ma'am, there's federal warrants out for you and your associates. You need to surrender to proper authorities." "The proper authorities are the ones who murdered my husband," Elena replied calmly. "Sergeant, I have evidence of massive corruption involving Deputy Director Harold Vance and multiple law enforcement agencies. People are going to die tonight if we don't get this information to honest investigators." The younger officer was already reaching for his radio, but the sergeant stopped him with a gesture. Years of police work had taught him to recognize truth when he heard it. "What kind of evidence?" the sergeant asked. Elena pulled out the encrypted drive. "Audio recordings of federal agents planning murders, financial records proving cartel infiltration of law enforcement, and proof that tonight's operation is designed to eliminate witnesses." The sergeant's eyes flicked to the federal vehicles visible through the loading dock entrance. "Those agents out there, they're not here to arrest you, are they?" "They're here to execute us and claim we resisted federal authority." Elena's voice carried absolute conviction. "Sergeant, in 2 hours, everything we've found is going public automatically. All we need is to survive long enough for the truth to come out." The sergeant made his decision. "Johnson, secure the loading dock. We're taking these people to Lieutenant Hayes and CID. If there's federal corruption this deep, she needs to know." But as they moved toward the building's interior, Detective Brennan's phone buzzed with an urgent text message. Her face went pale as she read it. "They've got my partner," she said. "Detective Martinez was supposed to meet me at the safe house an hour ago. Vance's people picked him up." Elena's tactical instincts kicked in. That's not random. They're using him as leverage to force you into the open. Or bait, Ryan realized. They know you'll try to rescue him. Brennan's jaw tightened. Martinez has a wife and kids if Vance's people are willing to murder federal agents and their families. Then they won't hesitate to kill a local detective who knows too much, Elena finished. They reached Lieutenant Hayes's office to find a woman in her 40s with the kind of sharp intelligence that had probably saved her from Vance's recruitment efforts. Elena quickly explained the situation while Hayes examined the evidence drive. "This is above my pay grade," Hayes said after reviewing the financial records. "But if what you're saying is true, we've got federal agents planning murders inside my jurisdiction." That's when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in immediately, but through the office windows they could see federal tactical teams surrounding the building. Vance had abandoned any pretense of cooperation. This was now an open assault on Phoenix Police Department headquarters. "All units, we have federal agents attempting unauthorized entry," Hayes announced over the radio. This is not a joint operation. Treat as hostile until proper warrants are presented." Elena checked her weapon and moved toward the window. "He's forcing a confrontation between federal agents and local police. When the shooting starts, he'll claim we used Phoenix PD as human shields." Ryan watched the tactical teams positioning for entry. "How many honest cops are in this building?" "About 60%, Hayes replied grimly. "The other 40% will follow federal orders without question." Elena's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed Deputy Director Vance's number. "He wants to negotiate," Elena said, but her finger hovered over the answer button. "Don't," Ryan warned. "Whatever he's offering is a trap." Elena answered anyway, putting the call on speaker. "What do you want, Harold?" Vance's voice filled the room, smooth and confident, despite the tactical situation developing outside. "I want Detective Martinez returned safely to his family. I want you to surrender the fabricated evidence your husband created. And I want this to end before more good people get hurt." "Where's Martinez?" Brennan demanded. "Safe, for now. But my associates are growing impatient. Surrender in the next 10 minutes, or Detective Martinez becomes another casualty of your terrorist resistance." Elena looked at Ryan, then at Lieutenant Hayes. The honest cops in the building were preparing to defend against federal agents. Detective Martinez was being held hostage, and in 90 minutes, Marcus's dead man switch would expose everything anyway. "I'll surrender," Elena said finally. "But only to you, Harold. Face to face. No tactical teams, no intermediaries." "Elena!" "No," Ryan grabbed her arm. "You walk out there. You're dead." She met his eyes with the calm determination of someone who'd already made peace with the necessary sacrifice. "Marcus died protecting this evidence. If I have to die finishing his mission, that's acceptable." But Ryan remembered his promise to a dying man. "Protect my family." "No," he said firmly. "I'll go instead. I'm the one they really want, the witness who pulled your family from that burning house." Elena shook her head. "You don't understand federal operations. They need me because I have access to Marcus's encrypted files. You're just a loose end they want tied up." Lieutenant Hayes interrupted them. "Both of you are thinking like victims instead of tacticians. We don't surrender to terrorists, even if they wear federal badges." She keyed her radio. "All units, we have a hostage situation involving corrupted federal agents. Prepare for tactical response." Through the office windows, they could see Vance's teams reacting to increased police resistance. The situation was escalating toward open warfare between federal agents and local police. Elena checked the time on her phone. 87 minutes until the dead man switch activates. We just need to survive long enough for the truth to come out. That's when Ryan made his decision. He grabbed Elena's phone and hit redial for Vance's number. "Vance, this is Captain Torres. I'm coming out. Elena Dalton stays inside with the evidence, and you release Detective Martinez. Take me instead." "Ryan, no!" Elena lunged for the phone, but Ryan stepped away. "1 hour, Harold. I'll trade myself for Martinez, and in 1 hour, everyone will know what you've done anyway." Vance's pause was calculating. "You're not in a position to negotiate, Captain." "Actually, I am. Because right now, you've got federal agents pointing guns at local police. That's going to be very hard to explain to the media. But if you take me as a hostage and withdraw your teams, it looks like standard crisis negotiation." Ryan could hear Vance weighing his options. The deputy director needed a way to save face while positioning himself to eliminate the evidence before it went public. 1 hour, Vance agreed. "Front entrance. You come alone, or Martinez dies." Elena stared at Ryan with horror and understanding. "You're not just surrendering. You're buying time for the dead man's switch. And honoring my promise to your husband." Ryan checked his service weapon, then handed it to Lieutenant Hayes. "Marcus asked me to protect his family. Sometimes protection means sacrifice." As Ryan prepared to walk into Vance's trap, Elena grabbed his arm one final time. "When this is over," she said, "make sure my children know their father died a hero." Ryan nodded, kissed her forehead like the sister she'd become, and walked toward the front entrance of Phoenix Police Department headquarters. Behind him, Elena Dalton prepared for the longest hour of her life. Ahead of him, Deputy Director Harold Vance waited with enough firepower to start a war. The final confrontation was about to begin. Ryan walked through the front doors of Phoenix Police Department headquarters with his hands raised, emergency lighting casting harsh shadows across his face. Deputy Director Vance waited in the parking lot with a tactical team positioned behind armored vehicles, their weapons trained on the building behind Ryan. "Captain Torres," Vance called out, his voice carrying the artificial warmth of a predator luring prey. "Thank you for being reasonable, unlike your associates." Ryan stopped 20 feet from Vance's position, close enough to see the deputy director's eyes, but far enough to dive for cover if the situation went bad immediately. "Where's Detective Martinez?" Vance gestured toward a black SUV where Ryan could see a figure slumped in the back seat. Even from this distance, it was clear Martinez had been beaten. "Alive as promised, though my associates were enthusiastic during his questioning." "Let him go. I'm here." "In a moment." Vance stepped closer, and Ryan could see the man's federal executive facade had completely dissolved. What remained was pure calculation, the look of someone who'd spent years making problems disappear. "First, we need to discuss the fabricated evidence your widow friend claims to have." Ryan kept his voice steady despite his growing certainty that he wasn't walking away from this parking lot. "What evidence?" "I'm just a firefighter who responded to a house fire." Vance's smile was cold. "A firefighter who somehow became involved in espionage, terrorism, and the theft of classified materials. That's going to be a very interesting story for the media." Through his peripheral vision, Ryan could see snipers positioned on surrounding buildings. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution with an audience of honest cops watching from the police station windows. "The thing about stories, Harold," Ryan said, using Vance's first name deliberately, "is that the truth has a way of coming out eventually." "Not this time." Vance checked his watch. "In 43 minutes, a gas leak explosion will destroy the Phoenix Police Department evidence room. Mrs. Dalton and her terrorist cell will be killed in the blast, along with all the fabricated materials they created to frame patriotic federal agents." Ryan's blood went cold. "You're going to blow up police headquarters?" "Tragic accident. Gas leaks are so unpredictable in older buildings." Vance's tone was conversational, as if discussing the weather. "Of course, we'll rescue as many officers as possible, the ones who aren't part of Mrs. Dalton's terrorist conspiracy." The scope of Vance's plan crystallized in Ryan's mind. Mass murder disguised as an industrial accident, with the survivors being either corrupted cops or federal agents who could control the narrative. "You won't get away with murdering 60 police officers," Ryan said. "I'll get away with stopping a domestic terrorism incident that threatened federal law enforcement operations." Vance pulled out his phone. "The official report is already written. A grief-stricken widow, radicalized by conspiracy theories about her husband's death, recruited a disgraced firefighter and corrupt detective to attack federal agents with stolen explosives." Ryan realized Elena and the others inside the police station had no idea what was coming. Vance wasn't planning to breach the building. He was planning to level it. "The evidence will still go public," Ryan said desperately. "You can't stop the dead man's switch." Vance laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "What dead man's switch? Agent Dalton's paranoid fantasy about automatic uploads? My technical people disabled that system hours ago. Every computer connected to his encryption network has been compromised." Ryan felt hope drain from his chest like blood from a wound. Marcus's final protection for his family had been neutralized before the game even began. "You see, Captain Torres, this is what happens when amateurs try to play games with professionals." Vance gestured toward his tactical team. I've been managing federal operations for 15 years. I've buried senators, generals, and federal judges who threatened national security. A dead agent's paranoid widow was never going to be a problem. That's when Ryan heard it, the distant sound of helicopters approaching. But these weren't federal aircraft. The markings were wrong, the approach pattern different. Vance heard them too, his confident expression flickering with the first sign of concern. What the hell is that? The helicopters came in fast and low. News crews, Channel 7, Channel 12, even a national network feed. Their searchlights illuminated the parking lot like a movie set, and Ryan could see camera operators broadcasting live footage of the standoff. "Impossible," Vance breathed, speaking into his radio. How did media get word of this operation? Elena's voice came from a bullhorn inside the police station, amplified and crystal clear. Deputy Director Harold Vance is holding Phoenix Fire Captain Ryan Torres at gunpoint in the parking lot of police headquarters. We have transmitted evidence of federal corruption to every major news outlet in the country. The American people are watching. Ryan smiled despite his desperate situation. Elena had outplayed Vance using the one weapon the deputy director couldn't control: public exposure. The dead man's switch wasn't digital, Ryan realized. It was human. Vance's face contorted with rage. "You think media attention will save you? I'll claim you're armed, that you threatened federal agents. With news helicopters broadcasting live?" Ryan gestured toward the cameras focused on them. Kind of hard to edit reality when it's streaming to millions of people. But Vance's tactical training kicked in. He grabbed Ryan's arm and pressed a pistol against his temple, using him as a human shield while retreating toward the armored vehicles. "All units, we have a terrorist with federal hostages," Vance announced over his radio. "Prepare for tactical response." Ryan felt the cold metal against his skull and realized Vance was still planning to salvage the situation. Kill Ryan on live television, claim self-defense, and use the chaos to eliminate Elena and the evidence inside the police station. "Elena!" Ryan shouted toward the building. "The gas explosion!" "He's planning to—" Vance slammed the pistol against Ryan's head, cutting off his warning. Blood ran down Ryan's face as his vision blurred, but he'd gotten enough of the message out. Through the police station windows, he could see movement as officers began evacuating the building. Elena had heard his warning, but Vance still had one card left to play. He keyed his radio with a code phrase Ryan didn't recognize. "Lighthouse Protocol, immediate execution." Across the parking lot, Ryan saw corrupted Phoenix PD officers drawing weapons on their honest colleagues. The evacuation turned into chaos as gunfire erupted inside the police station. Elena was trapped in a building full of people trying to kill her, while Ryan was about to be executed on live television by a federal agent who thought he could murder his way out of exposure. "Any last words, Captain?" Vance whispered in Ryan's ear. Ryan looked directly into the closest news camera, blood streaming down his face, and spoke clearly enough for every microphone to pick up his words. "Elena Dalton is a hero. Her husband was murdered for investigating corruption, and Deputy Director Harold Vance is about to kill me to cover up federal crimes." Vance's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, a shot rang out from the police station roof. Detective Lisa Brennan's sniper rifle had found its mark. Vance stumbled backward, his shoulder exploding in blood, the pistol spinning away across the asphalt. Ryan rolled away as Vance's tactical team opened fire on the police station. But now they were shooting at a building surrounded by news helicopters, their every action broadcast live to the nation. The war Elena had declared was no longer happening in shadows. It was happening under the brightest spotlight in America. The gunfight in Phoenix Police Department headquarters was being broadcast live to 12 million viewers as Elena Dalton moved through the chaos like a ghost with a gun. She'd memorized the building layout during her husband's security briefings, and now that knowledge was keeping her alive as corrupted cops hunted her through hallways filled with tear gas and emergency lighting. "Brennan, where are you?" Elena whispered into her radio, pressing herself against a wall as footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Third floor, evidence room. I've got Martinez. He's alive, but hurt bad. Detective Brennan's voice was tight with concentration. How many of our own people are trying to kill us? Elena counted muzzle flashes through the smoke. At least 8, maybe more. They're coordinated. This was planned. Outside, news helicopters circled like mechanical vultures while Ryan fought for his life in the parking lot. Elena could see him through the windows, using Vance's wounded condition to break free from the tactical team's formation. But the deputy director wasn't finished. Even bleeding from Brennan's shot, Vance was coordinating his people with the cold efficiency of a career federal operative. All units, the building is compromised. Vance's amplified voice carried over the gunfire. We have domestic terrorists using Phoenix PD as a base of operations. Authorization to use deadly force on all targets. Elena realized what he was doing. Turn the honest cops into casualties, claim the corrupted ones were defending themselves, and use the media coverage to justify whatever level of violence was necessary to eliminate the evidence. She keyed her radio to the emergency frequency every news crew would be monitoring. This is Elena Dalton inside Phoenix Police Headquarters. Deputy Director Harold Vance has corrupted federal agents and local police officers attempting to murder honest law enforcement. We have evidence of a criminal conspiracy reaching the highest levels of government. Her transmission was interrupted by automatic weapons fire that chewed through the wall 6 inches from her head. Elena rolled behind a concrete pillar as 2 men in Phoenix PD uniforms advanced down the hallway. But these weren't the cops she'd met earlier. Their movements were too professional, their gear too expensive. Vance's federal assets wearing stolen uniforms. Elena's training kicked in. She waited until they passed her position, then put 2 precise shots into the first man's center mass. The second spun toward her, but Elena was already moving, using the hallway's geometry to stay ahead of his aim. The federal asset's mistake was assuming he was hunting a grieving widow instead of a woman trained by one of the FBI's best agents. Elena's third shot dropped him beside his partner. "Evidence room now," she said into her radio, grabbing the fake officer's weapons and ammunition. "We need to get Martinez out before Vance brings the whole building down." She reached the evidence room to find Detective Brennan had turned it into a makeshift field hospital. Detective Martinez was conscious, but barely, his face a mass of bruises from Vance's questioning. "Can you move?" Elena asked, checking his pupils for signs of serious head trauma. Martinez nodded weakly. "Bastards wanted to know about federal informants in Phoenix PD. Beat me for 2 hours when I told them to go to hell." "Good man." Elena helped him to his feet. "Now we need to get you somewhere safe before—" The building shook with a low rumble that had nothing to do with gunfire. Elena's blood froze as she recognized the sound. Controlled demolition charges, the kind used in professional building destruction. He's not waiting for a gas explosion, she realized. Vance is bringing the building down right now. Brennan grabbed Elena's arm. "How long do we have?" Elena's mind raced through what she knew about federal demolition protocols. Minutes? Maybe less. He's going to claim we had explosives, that we triggered them during the firefight. Through the evidence room windows, she could see the news helicopters pulling back to a safe distance. Their cameras would capture the building's destruction, but the only witnesses to what really happened would be buried in the rubble. "There's a way out," Martinez said, struggling to focus through his injuries. "Old tunnel system from the 1960s. Connects to the courthouse basement. Built during the Cold War for emergency evacuation." Elena stared at him. "Where's the entrance?" "Sub-basement, but it's behind locked doors that require authorization codes." "My husband gave me authorization codes for federal buildings," Elena said, hope flickering in her chest. "Emergency access in case of terrorist threats." They made their way toward the sub-basement as the building continued to shake with small explosions. Vance's people were systematically destroying support structures, making it look like a terrorist bomb instead of professional demolition. The sub-basement was a maze of pipes and electrical systems that looked like they hadn't been maintained since the Carter administration. But Martinez led them to a section of wall that looked different. Newer concrete, hidden hinges. Elena entered Marcus's emergency codes into a keypad hidden behind a false panel. The wall swung open, revealing a tunnel that stretched into darkness. Marcus knew about this, Elena realized. He gave me these codes in case I ever needed to escape federal pursuit. They entered the tunnel as the building above them began its final collapse. Elena could hear massive chunks of concrete hitting the floors above, the screams of people trapped in the destruction. But they weren't the only ones in the tunnel. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness ahead of them, and Elena recognized the tactical movement of Vance's team. The deputy director had anticipated their escape route. He knew about the tunnel, Brennan breathed. How did he know? Elena's mind supplied the terrible answer. Because my husband wasn't the only federal agent who had those codes. Vance has been planning this for months. They were trapped in a narrow underground passage with federal killers ahead of them and a collapsing building behind them. But Elena Dalton had one advantage Vance hadn't calculated. She was fighting for her children's future, and that made her more dangerous than any federal training could prepare for. "Martinez, how far to the courthouse?" she asked, checking her remaining ammunition. "Quarter mile. But there's only one way through." Elena smiled grimly in the darkness. "Then we go through them." She started forward into the tunnel, toward the final confrontation with the man who'd murdered her husband. Behind them, Phoenix Police Department headquarters collapsed in a cloud of dust and lies. Ahead of them, Deputy Director Harold Vance waited with the last of his federal assets. But Elena Dalton was no longer running from the corruption that had destroyed her family. She was hunting it. The courthouse tunnel stretched ahead like a concrete throat, lit only by the dancing beams of tactical flashlights from Vance's team. Elena counted at least 4 sets of lights, which meant 4 federal assets between them and freedom. "They're setting up an ambush at the halfway point," Detective Brennan whispered, studying the light patterns. "Classic funnel kill zone?" Elena checked her ammunition. 2 magazines left, maybe 30 rounds total. Not enough for a sustained firefight against federal agents with superior firepower and tactical positions. But Marcus had taught her that superior tactics could overcome superior numbers. "Martinez, is there any other way through this tunnel?" she asked. The injured detective shook his head. "Single passage, but there's maintenance alcoves every 100 feet for electrical access." Elena's mind raced through possibilities. How much explosives knowledge do Phoenix PD detectives have? "Basic training. Why?" Elena pulled out a device she'd taken from Marcus's evidence cache, a federal flashbang grenade with a 30-second delay timer. "Because we're not fighting our way through their ambush. We're going around it." She led them to the first maintenance alcove, a narrow space filled with electrical conduits and water pipes. The space was cramped, but it offered concealment and access to the tunnel's infrastructure. "Vance's people will expect us to advance down the main passage," Elena explained, setting the flashbang's timer. "But if we create enough chaos, we can move past their position while they're blind and disoriented." Brennan understood immediately. "You're going to blow out the electrical system and advance in darkness." "More than that." Elena pointed to the water pipes running along the tunnel ceiling. "Those pipes feed the courthouse sprinkler system. We rupture them at the right moment, and Vance's team will be fighting in darkness, noise, and flooding water." She set the timer for 20 seconds and rolled the flashbang down the main tunnel toward the federal ambush position. Then she used the butt of her pistol to crack the nearest water pipe, sending a spray of high-pressure water across the tunnel. "When that thing goes off, we move fast and stay low," Elena said. "Brennan, you take point. Martinez, stay between us. I'll cover our rear." The flashbang detonated with a thunderclap that shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. Emergency lighting flickered and died, plunging the passage into absolute darkness. The ruptured water pipe turned into a geyser, flooding the tunnel floor with ankle-deep water. Elena heard shouting from Vance's position, tactical commands mixed with confusion as the federal agents tried to regroup in conditions they hadn't anticipated. "Move," Elena whispered. They advanced through the flooded tunnel, using the sound of rushing water to mask their footsteps. Elena's training guided her movements. Stay low, avoid silhouetting against any light source. Trust your teammates to watch their assigned sectors. They were 50 feet past the ambush position when Elena heard Vance's voice, amplified by the tunnel acoustics. "Mrs. Dalton, this is pointless. The building is gone. The evidence is destroyed. Your husband's investigation died with him." Elena kept moving, but her mind was working through the implications of Vance's words. If he was talking instead of shooting, it meant he wasn't entirely confident in his position. "You've cost me a lot of assets tonight," Vance continued. "Federal agents, local contacts, years of careful network building, but none of it matters if you don't survive to testify." They reached a section of tunnel where emergency lighting still functioned. Elena could see the courthouse exit ahead, a steel door marked with federal security warnings. But she could also see Vance's final gambit. The deputy director stood alone at the exit, his shoulder bandaged but his weapon steady. Behind him, Ryan Torres knelt with his hands zip-tied, blood still streaming from the head wound Vance had given him in the parking lot. "I have your firefighter friend," Vance called out, "and I have an offer, you for him. The evidence dies, my network survives, and Captain Torres gets to go home to whatever family he has left." Elena felt Brennan tense beside her, ready to take the shot. But the angle was wrong. Any bullet that hit Vance might pass through and kill Ryan. "What's it going to be, Mrs. Dalton? Your life for his?" Elena stepped into the light, her weapon trained on Vance's center mass. "Here's my counteroffer, Harold. You let Ryan go, and I don't kill you where you stand." Vance laughed, the sound echoing off tunnel walls. "You're not in a position to negotiate. I have superior firepower, superior position, and superior training." "You're right about one thing," Elena said, stepping closer. "You do have superior training, federal anti-terrorism protocols, crisis management, even psychological warfare techniques." She moved with deliberate precision, closing the distance while keeping her weapon aimed. "But there's one thing Marcus taught me that your federal training never covered." "What's that?" Elena's smile was cold as winter steel. "Never underestimate a mother protecting her children." She dove sideways just as Detective Brennan's sniper shot split the air where her head had been, but Elena wasn't the target. Brennan had been waiting for Elena to create the angle she needed. Vance spun toward Brennan's position, his weapon tracking toward the new threat. But Elena was already moving, her tactical training combining with maternal fury to create something deadlier than any federal operative. Her first shot took Vance in the leg, dropping him to one knee. Her second shot shattered his weapon hand, sending his pistol spinning across the tunnel floor. Elena stood over the deputy director who had ordered her family's execution, her weapon aimed at his head. "My husband spent 3 years investigating your network," she said, her voice steady as a judge pronouncing sentence. "He found evidence of corruption reaching into the highest levels of government. He died trying to protect the American people from criminals wearing federal badges." Vance looked up at her with eyes full of calculation and zero remorse. "You think killing me will change anything? I'm replaceable. The network is bigger than one man." "I'm not going to kill you, Harold." Elena stepped back, lowering her weapon slightly. "I'm going to do something much worse." She pulled out her phone and showed Vance the screen. It displayed a live video feed, news cameras broadcasting from the courthouse steps above them. "For the past 10 minutes, every word you've said has been transmitted to those news crews. Your confession about destroying evidence, your admission of running a criminal network, your threats to murder federal witnesses." Vance's face went pale as he realized the scope of his exposure. You see, the dead man's switch wasn't just about uploading files, Elena continued. It was about making sure your crimes were witnessed by the American people in real time. Detective Martinez stepped forward, producing a pair of handcuffs despite his injuries. Deputy Director Harold Vance, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, federal corruption, and terrorism. As Martinez read Vance his rights, Elena cut Ryan's zip ties and helped him to his feet. You kept your promise, Ryan said, his voice hoarse from the night's violence. Elena looked at the man who'd risked everything to honor a dying husband's final words. We both did. They emerged from the courthouse tunnel to find a scene that would dominate news cycles for months. Federal agents in tactical gear surrendering to local police. News crews broadcasting live coverage of the biggest law enforcement corruption scandal in American history. And in the distance, the smoking ruins of Phoenix Police Department headquarters. But Elena Dalton barely noticed the chaos. Her phone was ringing with a call from the safe house where her children waited. Mommy? Sophie's voice was small and scared. Are you coming home? Elena smiled through tears that had nothing to do with tear gas or smoke. Yes, baby, Mommy's coming home, and the bad men can't hurt us anymore. As federal investigators began the process of dismantling Vance's network, Elena realized Marcus's final mission was complete. The corruption had been exposed, the criminals would face justice, and their children could grow up in a world slightly safer than the one their father had died protecting. 6 months later, Elena Dalton testified before a congressional committee investigating federal law enforcement corruption. Her testimony, combined with Marcus's evidence, led to the largest reorganization of federal agencies since Watergate. Deputy Director Harold Vance was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Esteban Molina and 14 cartel associates were arrested in coordinated raids across 3 countries. 47 federal agents and local law enforcement officers were indicted on corruption charges. And Ryan Torres received a commendation for extraordinary heroism in the line of duty. But the moment Elena treasured most came on a quiet Sunday morning when she found Sophie and Jake playing in their backyard while she and Ryan rebuilt the garden that had been destroyed in the fire. Do you think Daddy would be proud of us? Sophie asked, holding up a flower she'd planted where Marcus's office used to be. Elena knelt beside her daughter, remembering a dying man's final words and the promise that had changed everything. Yes, sweetheart, she said. Daddy would be very proud. In the distance, Phoenix rose against the desert sky. A city slightly more honest than it had been before, a firefighter made a promise to a dying federal agent. And in a quiet suburban backyard, a family began to heal.